You're tuned in to the only all-sports talk network in the Middle East, IsraelSportsRadio.com.
Hey folks, Kagan here. As you know, I'm always staying on top of the fitness world, keeping up with current trends. One form of exercise that's been around for ages and is currently being rediscovered is suspension bodyweight training. So if you're looking for a way to get in shape, improve your health, and train your body to move in new ways, then the X1 by Israel Gym Systems is for you. Find out more on our website at www.israelgym.com or look for our page on Facebook, Israel Gym Systems X1. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
You're already using a credit card every day. Why not feel good every time you make a purchase? When using the HAS Advantage Support Israel Visa card, a percentage of each purchase you make will be donated to your choice of 24 Israeli-based charities, while still earning a reward point for every dollar spent. But wait, these rewards are even better than the standard rewards you get, especially when using them towards Israel travel, with the best conversion rate on El Al's Matmeed Frequent Flyer program. Earn double points at some of your favorite supermarkets and restaurants in the U.S., as well as discounts all over Israel. If you love traveling and supporting Israel, HAS Advantage is the card for you. Just give us a call toll-free at 1-866-6-ISRAEL. Sign up right now with the code ISR10 to earn 2,500 bonus points. That's 1-866-647-7235. HAS Advantage. Earn rewards. Support Israel. Offer valid for U.S. citizens only. Terms and conditions do apply. When dialing from within Israel, please dial 1-800-200-818.
Israel Sports Dynamics specializes in football consulting, equipment, uniforms, and more. Great brands such as Nike, Russell Athletics, Schutt Sports Products, and many more. Just one call away. With over 30 years coaching experience with university and professional athletes, Terry Hill, owner of ISD, can advise you for all your sports needs. Call 054-581-3248. That's 054-581-3248, or visit our website at www.isdisrael.com. If that's not easy enough, click on the ISD banner on the Israel Sports Radio website and be part of the game.
Are you tired of paying for expensive gym memberships that you don't use? Are you frustrated by not seeing results? It's time for the X1. Israel Gym Systems is proud to launch the X1 Suspension and Bodyweight Training System. Lose weight, build muscle, improve balance, coordination, and flexibility. With your purchase of the X1, you'll receive a free membership to IsraelGym.com and access to our archives of videos and exercise plans. Sign up today at www.israelgym.com and get ready for the new you. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
Broadcasting live from Israel.
IsraelSportsRadio.com.
Remember the golden rule. Those who have the gold make the rules.
You're listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with financial expert Douglas Goldstein. This show is designed to give general information related to investing and finance. Neither Doug Goldstein, his guests, nor the radio station are rendering legal, tax, insurance, or specific financial advice. If you require such advice, contact a competent professional advisor. Before making any investment decisions based on what you heard during the show, please review the complete disclaimer located at www.goldsteinongelt.com. And now, here's your host, Money Maven, Doug Goldstein.
Good Money Monday. I'm Doug Goldstein. Thanks so much for joining me right here on the Goldstein on Gelt show. Gelt, of course, being the Yiddish word for money. We will be talking about money today, but from a little bit of a different angle. Today we're going to be talking with Jim Jatras, who is formerly a U.S. Foreign Service officer. He's now discussing all over the place in the media, on websites, about the law called FATCA. FATCA is this regulation which requires banks all over the world to turn over all of their information about United States citizens to the United States government. So many people think this is a great idea because it's an opportunity for the U.S. government to find all of the tax cheats, but Jim Jatras doesn't think so. For those of you who don't know much about the law, go to expatguidetomoney.com. You can get the book that I wrote called The Expatriate's Guide to Handling Money and Taxes, which gives you a good overview of some of the issues. And Jim's going to be talking to us about why he thinks FATCA is the worst law ever. And then in the second half of the show, I'll be bringing on John C. Goodman. He's the president of the National Center for Policy Analysis, and he's the author of the new book, Priceless, Curing the Healthcare Crisis, and we will be talking to him about the costs of healthcare in America. So stay tuned.
It's Goldstein on Gelt, yeah, Goldstein on Gelt. Get global investment ideas with a touch of local wisdom. Get analysis and commentary on protecting your money. It's Goldstein on Gelt, yeah, Goldstein on Gelt.
One of the reasons that we end up talking about money so much is that people are trying to plan for the long term. What does that mean? It really means that people are trying to do retirement planning. So I talk a lot about financial planning, but what I've noticed over the years is more and more people are using the two terms interchangeably, retirement planning and financial planning. Of course, I would say that retirement planning is a subsection of the overall financial plan, but when I look at the financial plans that I actually do for clients, we're always starting at the end. We're always looking to see, does the client have enough money at the end of their lives? And then we work backwards to see how we can improve their lives today. So I guess really retirement is the goal of most people that I speak with. That's not to say that helping their kids get through school or buying a property or going on vacation isn't part of it, but that the big goal seems to be retirement. And one of the big areas of retirement is early retirement. Is that something that you've been looking at? First off, I would love to hear your stories if you've been considering early retirement or you're trying to find a way to do it. It may sound appealing, by the way, but you have to realize that there are pros and cons to everything. I wrote about this, by the way, in the book called The Retirement Book. If you'd like to get a copy of that, just go to profile-financial.com, and right there on the homepage you'll see a picture with a cute cover of The Retirement Book. But the topic about whether you should retire early is something I think many, many, many people should consider if you've got the possibility. Now, there are a lot of employer-funded pension plans that specify when a person can retire. Normally, the earliest age you can begin to take money out of a regular retirement plan, like an IRA or a 401k in the United States, is 59 and a half. So if you get to that age, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to retire at that point? Normally people don't, but let's say that your goal really is to retire early. You don't necessarily have to take the money out immediately as soon as you can at age 59 and a half. And the fact is leaving the money in there longer is usually better because money inside the plan gets the benefit of tax deferral. You only have to start paying on tax on that money once you begin to take it out. And you have to take it out at age 70 and a half. So there's an extra 10 years of tax deferment that you can enjoy if you're able to leave the money inside the retirement plan. So what do most people do? Well, a lot of times they keep working until they're 60, 65, 70, or if they're going to retire early, they have another source of income. Now, let's say you have a big portfolio of stocks or bonds. In your financial plan, you could say, I'm going to retire early because I have whatever goal, and we can talk about that some other time, but I'd like to retire early. I'm going to support myself for 10 years on my savings, at which point I will then begin to use my retirement plans or begin to start taking my pensions or my Social Security. There are a lot of different ways of planning for early retirement, if that's in the books. By the way, it's not necessarily a great idea. I'm going to be speaking in a few weeks to someone who does research about why people should continue working. A woman named Liz Fideler, and she works at Boston College. She does a whole study on people working well into their not just 70s, but 80s and 90s. But that'll be an interview for a few weeks down the line. Stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for my first guest today on the Goldstein on Gelt show, who is going to be Jim Jatras, talking to us about the problems that people are having with FATCA, the law that requires foreign banks and foreigners and U.S. citizens overseas to report to the IRS.
Goldstein on Gelt is not only played in Israel on Monday nights at 7 p.m., but also around the world. Pick it up in a time zone near you.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show Jim Jatras, who is a former government relations and media specialist and a former Senate staff and U.S. State Department official. Jim, how you doing?
Very good, Doug. Actually, I'm a current government relations specialist, but a former official, but close enough.
Okay, I apologize. One of the things that you talk quite a bit about is this rule that those of us living in Israel, and in fact all Americans abroad, are quite concerned, which is referred to as FATCA. Can you give us a little background?
Sure. FATCA is a law, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, that was passed in 2010. And what it basically does is, besides requiring U.S. persons, which includes not just Americans abroad, but even lots of people who are citizens of other countries who don't even know they're considered U.S. persons under American law, to not only provide very detailed personal financial information to the IRS, but purports to force foreign financial institutions that are not even under U.S. jurisdiction to provide very detailed private financial information. And if they fail to do so, they would have a 30% penalty, or really a confiscation of any payments coming to that institution from the United States taken away from them. So it's really an unprecedented extraterritorial reach by a U.S. law into foreign countries.
But wasn't the purpose of the law in order for the U.S. to catch the international tax dodgers and money launderers?
No, I don't think so. In fact, if you read the law, there is not a single provision of the FATCA law that actually singles out tax evasion activity and seeks to detect it or police it in any way. In fact, I was talking to the economic section of one of the foreign embassies here in Washington recently, and they said that the Treasury Department told them specifically that they don't really expect it to catch tax evaders, that what they want is information and control over the financial activity of Americans abroad, or Americans who have accounts abroad.
Mm-hmm. Are you differentiating between FATCA and FBARs?
FBAR is a requirement that has been around for a very long time, and the Treasury Department has been stepping up enforcement of the requirement that Americans with foreign accounts file that. FATCA imposes a redundant, to some extent, requirement on top of FBAR, but even additional and more detailed reporting than FBAR requires. But then in addition to that, as I say, the foreign institution supposedly would also then have to report to the IRS.
Mm-hmm. So my day job, Jim, is that I actually sit in Israel, and I'm a financial advisor. I only do the radio gig once a week and get to speak to interesting guys like you. But as a financial advisor here, dealing mostly with Americans who live outside the United States, I deal with the issue that you mentioned a minute ago, which is a lot of people are not aware that they really have this obligation, and sometimes they're not even aware that they are U.S. persons or green card holders, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Is ignorance an excuse in this case?
No, it never is, and the compliance issue for the individual American or U.S. person or accidental American or dual citizen or spouse of an American and other people who will be pulled into this net is an important problem. The other big problem, of course, is for the financial institutions themselves. There are a lot of banks, insurance companies, pension funds in Israel and other countries that are being told by a foreign government, namely the government of the United States, you must comply with this act and provide this information, in many cases in violation of local data protection and privacy laws, or you'll be subject to this confiscatory penalty. And I think that's where the real rub comes in terms of the international system, which is why the Treasury Department has been trying to strong-arm foreign governments into signing so-called IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, under which they would be deputized by the IRS to enforce FATCA against their own institutions and their own citizens. And that's where I think things really get very questionable, because FATCA, as it's written, many experts, including FATCA supporters, understand it is not enforceable. They need to have these foreign governments enforce FATCA upon themselves, but those agreements and that procedure is not even provided for or authorized within FATCA.
Okay. We are talking with Jim Jatras, who is a government relations and media specialist, former Senate staff and U.S. State Department official, and an expert on FATCA. For those of you joining us on the Goldstein on Gelt show, you know that FATCA and FBAR and overseas taxation has been a very, very hot topic on the show. And in fact, a lot of people feel that, wow, tax season is over, but quite the opposite. This is an ongoing requirement.
Jim, I want to play devil's advocate for a minute because one of the reasons I think that the United States got so excited about passing these laws is because a few years ago they went to Switzerland, the bastion of secrecy, and were able to squeeze out of UBS the names of thousands of Americans who were hiding money there. As an American, or from the American standpoint, that's pretty good business, no?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, there are always going to be some people who engage in tax evasion. Now, that's a given, and I think vigorous enforcement activities designed to find actual tax evaders are one thing. The stupid thing, and actually, there's one great tax attorney here in Washington who calls FATCA, I think, 3 times in a very learned article, sheer idiocy about FATCA, is it doesn't target the tax evaders. Instead, it will net a lot of innocent people who are just minding their own business and impose literally billions and billions of dollars of costs on consumers and taxpayers globally, while real honest-to-God tax evaders will slip the net. The thing about tax evaders is they lie. They provide false information. FATCA will not do anything to actually address that problem, which, as you point out, is a legitimate, serious problem.
Mm-hmm. That's actually, that one point you're making is something that I would say personally affects me as a financial advisor all the time, because the Israeli banks, not understanding this and not wanting to have any problems with the IRS, have kicked out thousands of American clients and told them, we're sorry, you can have a regular banking account, but no investments, nothing fancy, and you got to go. And so,
exactly, that is a panic reaction on the part of foreign financial institutions worldwide. And the weird thing is that will not protect them from FATCA, because if it were that simple, all the institution will have to do is send a letter to the IRS and say, no Americans here. We don't accept Americans' accounts. That's not good enough. The IRS under FATCA will demand, do you have the, quote, due diligence in place to show you have detected any American accounts to our satisfaction?
Well,
and that's where the expense comes in.
Yeah, on the other hand, one of the things we've seen with the development of these treaties is that a lot of the foreign countries are pretty happy that now they can make a demand on the United States, which is actually known as a tax haven for people from other countries.
Well, there's yet another problem, though, because A, they're not treaties. There is no authority under U.S. law for these agreements. Secondly, that reciprocity will not take place from the American side. There is nothing in FATCA about reporting from American institutions. And let me tell you, in fact, just recently there was a letter from Congressman Bill Posey from Florida, and several other members support this, against any imposition of FATCA-like demands on American institutions for reporting to foreign governments. So they can claim they're going to get that information, but they're not going to. This is purely a one-way street.
I'd say do what I say, not what I do kind of thing.
I'd almost liken it to the League of Nations. We come up with this great idea, the rest of the world signs up for it, and then we just turn around and say, yeah, on second thought, we'd rather not.
You sound a little bit, negative about FATCA. Anything good you can say about the legislation?
No, I really don't think I can say anything good about this legislation. I think if you're interested in tax evasion and policing that and apprehending evaders and making them pay their fair share or their penalties, there are much better ways to go about this. And in fact, the IRS has actually gotten pretty good at that. This is a different kind of law entirely. I think it was very ill thought out. It's completely unworkable, and the only thing you can do is scrap it.
Well, first off, needless to say, I agree, because it gives me certainly a big headache. Although I do appreciate the fact that the Israeli banks send their clients over to me. But that being said, the Americans who are living overseas, by filing the FBARs and by realizing now that there are very, very strict regulations, or penalties if they don't do it, that's bringing a lot of them into compliance. So this sort of atmosphere of compliance that these new laws seem to be creating, in some way they must be helping the IRS, because, as you said, it's not so easy to find a guy who's hiding, but people who are just sort of ignoring the law now are really being brought back into the fold.
Well, I think that partly depends on what you mean by being brought back into the fold. And as you know, this is a specific problem because the United States, alone in the world, along with I think Eritrea, taxes the income of all Americans anywhere they are in the world, even when they're living abroad. In many cases, the Americans who are being brought back into the fold are paying thousands and thousands of dollars in penalties for non-filing, when in fact they didn't know any tax anyway. And so I think that's also part of the control mechanism here. Let's get everybody in the loop. Let's make them jump through a lot of hoops, file a bunch of papers, pay a bunch of penalties, even though they really didn't know any taxes at all. We have people, the so-called accidental Americans in Canada, say there are about 1 million of them, who may have been born in the United States or had a parent born in the United States, and suddenly find out when they're 80 years old, they're subject to thousands and thousands of dollars worth of penalties because they didn't file tax returns for the last 50 years. Does that make any sense?
No, it definitely hurts. Is there any possibility that the law is going to be repealed or changed?
I think there's a very good possibility. I think it could happen one of two ways. I was told by somebody from one of the industry associations here not long ago that he expected 3 or 5 years from now FATCA will not exist, but only after it's caused a global catastrophe in the financial system. And then kind of like prohibition, you say, oh, this is not working, we need to figure out something else. The other school of thought, and what I hope for, is that once it becomes clear there will be no reciprocity from the American side, that the whole process of the intergovernmental agreements will break down. The Treasury Department will see that trying to enforce FATCA as written would cause that catastrophe, and we will rethink this and put a FATCA repeal into a tax reform package, which probably will happen sometime in 2014 or 2015 before the global catastrophe occurs.
So one of the words that you've used a lot in this discussion, and I'm going to wrap up with this question, is that it's giving the government information and power, but not even necessarily taxation. In other words, they're not looking for the money. They just want control. Is that their motivation?
I think so. I think there's a certain enforcement mentality. And I remember at a conference where there were people from the IRS there who were just puzzled why anybody would not think this was a good thing. Because from the point of view of a government bureaucrat, having everybody living in a fishbowl in his underwear so we can see exactly what you have and exactly what you do all the time, well, what have you got to hide if you're not up to no good? I think they literally do not understand why a normal person doesn't think he should be subjected to that kind of a treatment unless he's really done something wrong, or there's probable cause that he's done something wrong.
Well, I guess that sort of cuts across the whole government, from the NSA and they're watching our phone calls to the government watching all of our bank accounts.
I think there's a very close analogy to that kind of thing. If you want to go find terrorists, go find terrorists. Why collect everybody's emails and phone calls to go find somebody else?
Well, I always think it's good because it means I know there's at least one more person listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show. We've been talking to Jim Jatras, who is a real expert in a number of issues as a government relations and media specialist, and having been a former Senate staff and U.S. State Department official. And he's written a lot and spoken quite a bit about FATCA. Jim, we're just about out of time, but in the last few seconds, tell us, how can people follow your work?
Well, they can find us at repealfatca.com, or they can email me at repealfatca@gmail.com. And frankly, if you just Google Repeal FATCA, our information will come up.
Okay, and we're going to put those links in that email on the show notes, so you can go to goldsteinongelt.com, click on show notes, and you'll find it all there. Jim, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doug.
If you are inspired by my little talk a few minutes ago about retiring early, but you just don't think that you can manage it, don't give up on early retirement so quickly. There are a lot of benefits. Maybe what you are not going to end up doing is retiring and living in the Caribbean, playing golf all day and drinking martinis at night. That might not be the actual retirement, and by the way, you might not really enjoy that retirement. But just because you retire from one job, it doesn't mean that you're completely out of the money-making world. A lot of people look to switch careers later in life. They may take a mini retirement and then get back to work. And then there's always just simple post-retirement part-time work if you need the money. And if you don't need the money and you want to do post-retirement volunteer work, that's perhaps another great option for a lot of people. All right, so we're just about at the end of part one of the Goldstein on Gelt show. If you didn't have a chance to hear the earlier interview with Jim Jatras about FATCA, or you don't know much about FATCA and want to learn more about it, go to expatguidetomoney.com, and there you'll see the book that I wrote called The Expatriate's Guide to Handling Money and Taxes. I suggest that anyone who is living overseas or considering living overseas understand the regulations, because they're very, very strict for people who don't have who are Americans or green card holders who don't have their assets held in the United States. There's all sorts of requirements that you need to know about. So stay tuned for part two of the show. I'll be bringing on John C. Goodman. John is the president of the National Center for Policy Analysis. He wrote a book called Priceless, Curing the Healthcare Crisis. There really does seem to be a pretty severe healthcare crisis, and the costs in the United States certainly are going up and up to maintain your healthcare. We need to hear from John all about that. For those of you living in Israel, it seems to be less of a problem because the socialized medicine model here in Israel seems to be working a little bit better, although there are a lot of problems with that too. But as someone who lived in the United States and now lives in Israel, I have to tell you that I'm pretty happy with the system here. We'll be talking to John Goodman about that after the break.
You're listening to Money Maven Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show. Stay tuned for the second half of the show right after the break.
We're tuned in to the only all-sports talk network in the Middle East, IsraelSportsRadio.com.
Hey folks, Kagan here. As you know, I'm always staying on top of the fitness world, keeping up with current trends. One form of exercise that's been around for ages and is currently being rediscovered is suspension bodyweight training. So if you're looking for a way to get in shape, improve your health, and train your body to move in new ways, then the X1 by Israel Gym Systems is for you. Find out more on our website at www.israelgym.com or look for our page on Facebook, Israel Gym Systems X1. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
You're already using a credit card every day. Why not feel good every time you make a purchase? When using the HAS Advantage Support Israel Visa card, a percentage of each purchase you make will be donated to your choice of 24 Israeli-based charities, while still earning a reward point for every dollar spent. But wait, these rewards are even better than the standard rewards you get, especially when using them towards Israel travel, with the best conversion rate on El Al's Matmeed frequent flyer program. Earn double points at some of your favorite supermarkets and restaurants in the U.S., as well as discounts all over Israel. If you love traveling and supporting Israel, HAS Advantage is the card for you. Just give us a call toll-free at 1-866-6-ISRAEL. Sign up right now with the code ISR10 to earn 2,500 bonus points. That's 1-866-647-7235. HAS Advantage. Earn rewards. Support Israel. Offer valid for U.S. citizens only. Terms and conditions do apply. When dialing from within Israel, please dial 1-800-200-818.
Israel Sports Dynamics specializes in football consulting, equipment, uniforms, and more. Great brands such as Nike, Russell Athletics, Schutt Sports Products, and many more. Just one call away. With over 30 years coaching experience with university and professional athletes, Terry Hill, owner of ISD, can advise you for all your sports needs. Call 054-581-3248. That's 054-581-3248, or visit our website at www.isdisrael.com. If that's not easy enough, click on the ISD banner on the Israel Sports Radio website and be part of the game.
Are you tired of paying for expensive gym memberships that you don't use? Are you frustrated by not seeing results? It's time for the X1. Israel Gym Systems is proud to launch the X1 suspension and bodyweight training system. Lose weight, build muscle, improve balance, coordination, and flexibility. With your purchase of the X1, you'll receive a free membership to IsraelGym.com and access to our archives of videos and exercise plans. Sign up today at www.israelgym.com and get ready for the new you. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
Broadcasting live from Israel.
IsraelSportsRadio.com. You're listening to Goldstein on Gelt.
When you feel like your money is flying out the window and your nest egg starts to fry, there's just one show with all you gotta know to understand the reasons why. Goldstein on Gelt will explain it all to you. Goldstein on Gelt will finally get it through. Personal finance advice like you never seen before. Interviews, stock tips, and so much more.
No matter how much planning or praying you do, at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision about handling your money. Best-selling author Dave Ramsey is great at offering practical advice, and we've got some of Dave's guidance right now, right here on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.
This is Dave Ramsey, and this is your Daily Money Makeover. Consolidating all your debts into one monthly payment is not going to help you get out of debt faster. In fact, it may actually slow you down. I'll explain next.
Save money on your grocery budget with e-meals from MealtimeMakeover.com. Let e-meals do the menu and grocery planning work for you. At only $5 a month, it's a no-brainer. Sign up today at MealtimeMakeover.com. That's MealtimeMakeover.com.
Jason in Alabama says, how can I consolidate my credit card debt into one payment? We're working our way out of debt, trying to do the debt snowball, but feel like it may be better to consolidate credit cards into one payment. Would this have a negative effect on my credit? No, you'd just be paying off your credit cards and having one card and putting them all on one. It doesn't have a negative effect on your credit, but Jason, there's no reason to do it. It doesn't solve anything. One payment doesn't save you any money. It's not that big a deal. And there's huge emotional benefit to paying off some of those smaller debts, drawing a line through them on your debt snowball and being done with them. List your debts smallest to largest, pay minimum payments on everything but the little one, and attack the little one. And the faster you pay them off, the more fired up and passionate you're going to be. And that really does change the whole thing. So, no, I don't suggest consolidating into one payment because it doesn't accomplish anything. I mean, really, there's no mathematical advantage. If the interest rate is the same, there's zero mathematical advantage to having one payment that's the equivalent of all your other payments put together.
For more straight talk on life and money, go to DaveRamsey.com.
Goldstein on Gelt will teach you everything you need to know. From a certified financial planner, you'll get great tips on the show. For financial advice, Doug Goldstein is your guy. It's Goldstein on Gelt. Yeah, Goldstein on Gelt.
Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt show John Goodman, who's the president and CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis, and he's the author of the book called Priceless, Curing the Healthcare Crisis. John, real pleasure to have you.
Glad to be with you.
So based on the title of your book, there seems to be a healthcare crisis. Can you tell us about that?
Well, in the United States, we have done what other developed countries have done. That is, we have completely suppressed the price system. We've completely suppressed normal market forces. And as a consequence, no one ever really sees a real price for anything in healthcare. No doctor, no patient, no employer, no employee. All of the prices are really artificial prices. And as a consequence, we face perverse incentives when we enter the healthcare system. And when we act on those perverse incentives, we do things that make costs higher, quality lower, and access to care more difficult than otherwise would have been the case.
Okay, so were it that things were more honest in terms of pricing, what would we be seeing?
Well, in a real market, we would see competition. We would see doctors and other providers competing for patients based on price. And when they compete on price, they also compete on quality. But the mistaken view outside of the outside world of the U.S. healthcare system is that we represent some variant of capitalist medicine. We don't. We are far more like the systems of other countries than anything remotely resembling a free market. In Canada, when people get health care, it's free. In the United States, it's almost free. We only pay 10 cents out of our own pocket every time we spend $1 at the doctor's office, for example.
Okay, so let's use a comparison maybe that I'm a little more familiar with because I've been living now in Israel about 20 years. I moved here from New York. And frankly, I understand our system here to be rather socialist because I only pay about $1.25 every time I go see the doctor. And the system seems to be working pretty well. What's the difference between what's going on here and, let's say, what the proposals are for the future of socialized medicine in the United States?
Well, all over the world, healthcare is very, very bureaucratic. In Israel, all over Europe, in the United States, we've completely suppressed normal market forces. To see real markets in healthcare, you have to go to the periphery of the healthcare system. Wherever you see patients spending with their own money, there you'll find real markets for healthcare. In the United States, they are the market for cosmetic surgery, the market for LASIK surgery. We have walk-in clinics in the United States that charge real prices, and they post those prices. But these small little markets here and there are at the periphery of the healthcare system. Most of the time when I consume healthcare, I'm spending someone else's money, not my own money. Therefore, I have an incentive to overconsume and be wasteful. And on the provider side, the incentive is to maximize against the payment formulas. And we're all doing things perversely that make costs higher, quality lower, and access to care more difficult.
So aren't some of those so incredibly subjective that it's a little bit hard to say? For example, as a healthcare user, I always want all of the tests done just to be on the safe side.
Well, of course. And one of the things I did in Priceless was I hypothetically went through all of the ways that I can spend your money in the healthcare marketplace, even if I'm not sick. It turns out I can spend an enormous amount of money, even though I'm completely healthy. But if we all did that, we'd be spending many times the gross national product on healthcare. And that's the problem with incentives.
All right, so let's talk then about not the high net worth individual, because those people who can afford it, even in a socialized system, and I'll use Israel as the example, I'm married with 4 kids, so we do have our interactions on a pretty regular basis with doctors and hospitals. Probably once that I've been here, I was able to afford to go to a private doctor and pay what in order to pay for the service. In America, there are millions and millions and millions of people who simply don't have that possibility. Aren't they cut out of quality health care if they can't pay?
Well, most people in the United States have health insurance. And we have maybe upwards of 50 million people who are uninsured. But many of those people qualify for our Medicaid program for low-income families. And if they get sick and they need health care, they can join Medicaid. But even if they don't, we have safety net institutions that provide care for free to millions of people. So we do not have large numbers of people going without needed care. We do have people who probably delay seeing a doctor and delay the care that they need for financial reasons, but that's a different issue.
Okay, we're talking with John Goodman, who's an expert on the healthcare system. He is the CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis, and he wrote a book called Priceless, Curing the Healthcare Crisis. John, I saw a very interesting study recently. They done it in the United States. They asked a whole lot of people what they think of Obamacare and to ask them to define what is actually going on with it now. And the fact was that very few people could really define what it was and how it was affecting their lives. Here we are in 2013. It was signed about 3 years ago. What really is happening with Obamacare?
Well, it's incredibly complex, and even the president himself doesn't explain it very well. And so you wouldn't expect the ordinary person, man in the street, to be able to understand it very well.
But you do, I hope, so you can explain it to us.
Well, we're setting up exchanges, which I think is similar to something that's going on in Israel, where people can make choices among insurance plans, health plans. And for below average income folks, there are substantial subsidies coming from the government. There's a mandate that people get insurance. There's a mandate that employers provide insurance. And there are many, many loopholes and many perverse incentives built into this new system. And people are finding out that employers have incentive not to hire workers. They have incentive to hire temporary workers instead. They are discovering that if employers are discovering that if they hire part-time workers fewer than 30 hours a week, they don't have to provide health insurance to them. So we have a huge shift to part-time work. People are responding to the new perverse incentives of the new system.
As a result of the changes, though, aren't there actually today more people who are covered and more people who are getting preventative care and more women who have access to health care at a price that's more fair?
Well, this system doesn't really kick in fully until next January. So we don't know if a lot more people are going to get insurance. It may be that that more people become uninsured because employers have perverse incentives not to provide insurance, to pay a fine, which is far less expensive than the insurance itself. Individuals, now that they understand that they can get health insurance regardless of their health status for the same premium that a healthy person would pay, people have an incentive to stay uninsured until they get sick. So we'll have to wait and see just exactly how many additional people get insured, but there are all kinds of perverse incentives built into the process.
If the concept of this was to try to cover everyone, and it's really referred to, let's say, as socialized medicine, what was the point of doing it through employers instead of having the government be the one-stop shop where it pays everything? And in other words, why do you have to be employed or not?
This is a Rube Goldberg contraption. It was not put together by anyone who was making sure all the parts fit. And they wanted to get people insured, but they didn't really care how they did it. And so one way to do it is to force the employer to provide insurance. And for people who don't fit in that system, we have an expanded Medicaid system, which is for lower income folks. And for people who don't fit in that and they go on their own, they can go into the new health insurance exchanges, which is what we call managed competition. I think you have something similar to that in Israel. And so there's just different parts to the system, and there's no overriding mechanism to make sure it all fits together and works.
Okay, I hear that. So let me go back. Maybe I didn't phrase my question properly. It seems that if you want a system that will, I understand that governments are not always looking to be the most efficient, but you have millions of employers. Why get them so involved in the system and not just have everyone sign up in his local town hall to get health insurance?
Because the biggest problem in health reform is where you're going to get the money, and employers are a source of money, and so
they could just be taxed, right? In other words, tax the companies and then use that to pay the health care.
They could be taxed, and people could be taxed, but there's a limit to how much politicians were willing to raise taxes. So most of the money that's spent on health reform comes from within the system. It's not coming from outside the system. We're almost half the cost of insuring young people is going to be paid for by reducing spending on older people under our Medicare program. And so they were just pulling money wherever they thought they could get it, and the employer mandate was part of that.
A lot of sort of the doomsayers, when you mentioned this about older people losing health benefits, they talk about these kind of committees that decide that so-and-so doesn't have the right to live. Do you see that's where we're going?
Well, I don't think we'll do anything quite that crude, but we are going to move in the direction of the British system of deciding whether certain procedures are worth their cost. And we might well be in a situation where some national committee is deciding that a cancer drug, for example, is not worth the cost, what it costs in terms of the extra months of life that it is expected to buy. I think we're moving there.
Okay, so presuming that we're being listened to, you and I, if you could give some suggestions for how the government could maybe switch tracks, what would be some of the top things they should be doing now in order to get this to get the system set up? Or are there countries perhaps that we should be emulating?
Well, the easiest way to get universal coverage without creating tons of perverse incentives and without going through a shell game is just to give every individual a fixed refundable tax credit and every family a tax credit for the purchase of private insurance. I think we in the United States could have $2,500 per year for adults, $8,000 a year for a family of four. That's a tax credit to apply to private insurance. If the family doesn't want to do that, I would let them buy into Medicaid, which again is our program for low-income folks, but I would let everybody buy into that program if they wanted to with their tax credit. And if people turn us down and they refuse the tax credit, I would put the money in a local safety net institution. So if they go in the hospital and they can't pay their bills, there will be money there for them.
And what about people who are uninsurable or too expensive to insure?
I would give everyone a one-time opportunity to become insured But I wouldn't let them go for years without insurance and then enter the system without medical underwriting.
Doesn't that then mean, so let's say, all the tens of millions of people who don't really feel like getting insured, they'll end up getting sick, and then we're just leaving them on their own?
No, we won't leave them on their own, but we're not going to let them into the pool, or I wouldn't let them into the pool without any financial penalty. So if you decide not to insure and you consume all your income and then you get sick and now you went into the insurance pool, I would charge you a hefty premium to do that, so that we discourage that kind of behavior.
Isn't this kind of similar to what Obamacare is talking about, which is they'll penalize people who don't sign up for insurance at, I think, 1% of their income?
The Obamacare strategy is to impose a mandate on people. The thing I don't like about the mandate is then you have to go on to say what insurance people have to buy, and then the special interests get to lobby and get their procedures covered by the mandate. I would rather just have the whole thing be financial. You get a tax subsidy if you buy insurance. If you don't buy the insurance, you're going to pay higher taxes, and we don't really need to go beyond that.
Mm-hmm. I hear. I think it's the way that governments tend to affect policy.
Well, once the government, what I'm describing to you, by the way, is called defined contribution. In other words, the government gives you a certain amount of money, and the market competes to see what it can provide for that sum of money. And what Obamacare does is its approach is called defined benefit. In other words, they require you to have insurance with a lot of benefits, all enumerated, and then they have to worry about how you're going to pay for it.
I hear. Okay. Well, it looks like it's a little bit of a tricky situation, and we are, of course, out of time when it gets to be very, very interesting. We've been talking to John Goodman, who is the head of the National Center for Policy Analysis. He's also the author of a book called Priceless, Curing the Healthcare Crisis. John, in the last few seconds, can you just tell people, how can they follow your work?
Well, go to John Goodman's Health Policy blog, and you'll find all kinds of interesting things on health policy. And if you're interested in public policies other than health, go to the ncpa.org website.
Okay, and we'll put links to those on our show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. John Goodman, thanks so much for your time.
Glad to be with you.
Now let's hear from CPA Ron Zalben with a tax tip on the Goldstein on Gelt show.
Hi, I'm Ron Zalben with the U.S. and Israeli CPA firm of Don Shunsky & Company in Jerusalem. In today's segment, I'd like to continue my previous segment's discussion of what income is exempt in Israel. And again, I want to stress for U.S. citizens, just because income is exempt in Israel does not mean it's exempt in America on your Form 1040. The first type of income that's exempt in Israel that I'd like to speak about today is withdrawals from a Kupat Gimel account, which is an Israeli IRA account. Prior to 2008, when Israel made pensions mandatory, employers could contribute half and employees could contribute half to a Kupat Gimel account in order to save for retirement. Today, Kupat Gimel plans are much less prevalent than they were before 2008, when employers did not have to set up a mandatory pension plan. However, they certainly still do exist. When taxpayers withdraw amounts from their Kupat Gimel account, provided that they are full retirement age, that distribution is tax-free in Israel. The second type of income I'd like to speak about that's exempt in Israel is life insurance proceeds. If you receive life insurance proceeds, like in the United States, that distribution is tax-free in Israel. A third type of income, which really isn't an income, rather it's a fringe benefit that employees receive that is potentially tax-free in Israel under certain situations, is where an employer provides organized transportation for workers to get to work. Generally what happens is a company will hire a van which will pick up workers either at their house or at a central meeting place and bring them to the office. This is only under certain situations. In other situations, this is considered a taxable fringe benefit. And if workers, for example, receive money for a bus pass, which is mandatory, or receive other transportation benefits in their check, that is considered taxable income. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to email me at ron@dscpa-israel.com.
Thanks so much, Ron Zalben from the CPA offices of Don Sharansky and Company in Jerusalem.
It's Goldstein on Gelt, yeah, Goldstein on Gelt, a certified financial planner. Get advice from Doug Goldstein. He'll give you tips and great advice on how to protect your money. Tune in to hear his special guests. On the show, you'll hear the best. It's Goldstein on Gelt, yeah, Goldstein on Gelt. It's Goldstein on Gelt.
As we're wrapping up this week's episode of the Goldstein on Gelt Show, there are a few things I just want to remind you. If you missed any of our interviews, you can always go to goldsteinongelt.com and download the podcast from there. You just go to goldsteinongelt.com, click on Listen Now, and you'll get to a page with all of our historic downloads. Or if you'd like to see the videos of them, go to YouTube, look up Goldstein on Gelt, and you'll see literally the hundreds and hundreds of interviews that we've got up there that are all in video format as well. I will be talking next week to Daniel Weisberg, who is from Google, and he'll be talking to us about what's called Google Analytics. I think it's something you'll find very interesting, and I'm also very excited to be bringing on Israel's chess champion, in fact, one of the top chess players on the planet, Boris Gelfand. I'm very happy to say that Boris Gelfand, when he was much, much younger, had worked with a chess coach who is the same chess coach that my kids have used. So maybe one day they will be world champion level chess players as well. That'll be on the Goldstein on Gelt show next Monday night. Be sure to stay tuned for that. Throughout the month of August, we've got a lot of great people coming up. If you want to be kept in touch with what's going to be happening, sign up for our weekly newsletter. Once a week, we just send out a note to all of our listeners, letting them know who's going to be on and if anything exciting is going on. In fact, we even sometimes have coupon codes when people want to buy some of the products that are mentioned on the show. Today, for example, we mentioned The Expatriate's Guide to Handling Money and Taxes, which is a book that you can buy at expatguidetomoney.com. But if you are a regular newsletter listener to the Goldstein on Gelt show, you'll get a discount code to buy that book. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, but before I sign off, let me take a minute to thank my producer, Yoram Mohana, my engineer, Naomi Grossman, and my associate engineer, J.P. Pasqua. And of course, thank you for joining me right here on the Goldstein on Gelt show.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with international investment expert Doug Goldstein. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, go to www.goldsteinongelt.com or write to Doug directly at doug@profile-financial.com.
You're tuned in to the only all-sports talk network in the Middle East, IsraelSportsRadio.com.
Hey folks, Kagan here. As you know, I'm always staying on top of the fitness world, keeping up with current trends. One form of exercise that's been around for ages and is currently being rediscovered is suspension bodyweight training. So if you're looking for a way to get in shape, improve your health, and train your body to move in new ways, then the X1 by Israel Gym Systems is for you. Find out more on our website at www.israelgym.com or look for our page on Facebook, Israel Gym Systems X1. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
You're already using a credit card every day. Why not feel good every time you make a purchase? When using the HAS Advantage Support Israel Visa card, a percentage of each purchase you make will be donated to your choice of 24 Israeli-based charities, while still earning a reward point for every dollar spent. But wait, these rewards are even better than the standard rewards you get, especially when using them towards Israel travel, with the best conversion rate on El Al's Matmeed frequent flyer program. Earn double points at some of your favorite supermarkets and restaurants in the U.S., as well as discounts all over Israel. If you love traveling and supporting Israel, HAS Advantage is the card for you. Just give us a call toll-free at 1-866-6-ISRAEL. Sign up right now with the code ISR10 to earn 2,500 bonus points. That's 1-866-647-7235. HAS Advantage. Earn rewards. Support Israel. Offer valid for U.S. citizens only. Terms and conditions do apply. When dialing from within Israel, please dial 1-800-200-818.
Israel Sports Dynamics specializes in football consulting, equipment, uniforms, and more. Great brands such as Nike, Russell Athletics, Schutt Sports Products, and many more. Just one call away. With over 30 years coaching experience with university and professional athletes, Terry Hill, owner of ISD, can advise you for all your sports needs. Call 054-581-3248. That's 054-581-3248, or visit our website at www.isdisrael.com. If that's not easy enough, click on the ISD banner on the Israel Sports Radio website and be part of the game.
Are you tired of paying for expensive gym memberships that you don't use? Are you frustrated by not seeing results? It's time for the X1. Israel Gym Systems is proud to launch the X1 suspension and bodyweight training system. Lose weight, build muscle, improve balance, coordination, and flexibility. With your purchase of the X1, you'll receive a free membership to IsraelGym.com and access to our archives of videos and exercise plans. Sign up today at www.israelgym.com and get ready for the new you. Israel Gym X1. Higia Hazman.
Broadcasting live from Israel.
IsraelSportsRadio.com.